It was 3 in the morning when my phone rang. The harsh vibration against my nightstand pulled me from a dreamless sleep. I saw Mom's number and immediately knew something was wrong. She never called this late. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "Your father collapsed at work today. He's in the ICU. The doctors, they found something." That word, something, hung in the air like a storm cloud. In my 47 years of life, I'd built my entire existence on certainty, on facts, on things I could measure and control. I was a software engineer, a man of logic and algorithms. Faith, spirituality, any form of belief beyond what I could prove, these were concepts I'd dismissed since college, yet here I was, about to embark on a journey that would shatter every certainty I'd ever held. Growing up in suburban Michigan, I was raised in what you'd call a casually religious household. We went to church on Easter and Christmas, said grace at Thanksgiving, but God was more of a cultural tradition than a living presence. My father was a mechanical engineer, my mother a high school science teacher. We believed in what we could see, touch, and measure. When my younger sister died in a car accident at 19, whatever threadbare faith, our family had completely unraveled. If there was a God, we reasoned, he was either powerless or cruel. Neither option seemed worth our devotion. I built my life on achievement and accumulation. By 30, I'd co-founded a tech startup. By 40, I'd sold it for 8 figures. I had the house in Palo Alto, the Tesla in the garage, the investment portfolio that my financial advisor called bulletproof. I worked 70-hour weeks and wore my exhaustion like a badge of honor. Success was my religion, and money was my salvation. But standing in that hospital corridor at 3:15 in the morning, watching my 71-year-old father hooked up to a ventilator, none of that mattered. The oncologist, a young woman who looked barely older than my own daughter, delivered the diagnosis with practiced compassion. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, metastasized to the liver. 3 to 6 months, maybe less. I remember staring at the fluorescent lights, humming overhead, thinking how strange it was that the world kept spinning. Outside the window, San Francisco glittered in the darkness. Indifferent to our private catastrophe, my mother sat in the corner, clutching her knitting needles but not knitting, just holding them like a lifeline. She hadn't brought yarn. The next weeks blurred together in a haze of medical consultations, second opinions, and desperate Google searches. I threw money at the problem, like I'd thrown money at every other challenge in my life. The best oncologists at Stanford, experimental treatments in Switzerland, immunotherapy trials at MD Anderson. But pancreatic cancer, I learned, doesn't care about your bank account. My father, meanwhile, faced his diagnosis with a strange serenity that infuriated me. While I raged against the unfairness of it all, he sat calmly in his hospital bed, reading old paperback novels and doing crossword puzzles. One afternoon, I finally exploded. "How can you just sit there?" I demanded. "How are you not angry? How are you not fighting?" He looked at me over his reading glasses, the same ones he'd worn since I was in high school, and smiled sadly. "I am fighting, son. Just not the way you think I should. By doing crosswords? By finding peace." I stormed out, furious at what I saw as resignation. In the parking garage, I sat in my car and screamed until my throat was raw. A security guard knocked on my window, concerned. I waved him away, embarrassed by my loss of control. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself in the hospital chapel. It was a small, non-denominational space, with abstract stained glass and uncomfortable pews. I wasn't there to pray, I was there because it was quiet and I needed to think. But as I sat in the dim light, I noticed an elderly black woman in the front row, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Against my better judgment, I moved forward and sat beside her. She looked up, startled, her face wet with tears. "I'm sorry," I said awkwardly. "I didn't mean to intrude." "It's all right," she whispered. "My grandson, 8 years old, leukemia." We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "You know what's strange? I've been coming here every night for 3 weeks. And you're the first person to sit with me. Sometimes I wonder if God sends people when we need them most." I wanted to tell her that I didn't believe in God, that I was here by accident, but something stopped me. Instead, I just sat with her. After a while, she began to pray aloud, not formal words. Just a conversation with someone she clearly believed was listening. She prayed for her grandson, for strength, for healing. Then, to my surprise, she prayed for me. "Lord, I don't know this man's burden, but I can see he's carrying something heavy. Whatever brought him here tonight, give him what he needs." My father started chemotherapy on a Tuesday. The cocktail of drugs they pumped into his veins was supposed to buy time, not cure. Quality of life, the doctors said. Though I couldn't see much quality in the violent nausea. The hair loss, the way his strong hands trembled when he tried to hold a cup of coffee. I took a leave of absence from work, something I'd never done in 20 years. My business partners were shocked. The company was in the middle of a major acquisition, and I was the lead negotiator. But for the first time in my adult life, I didn't care. I spent my days at the hospital, my nights researching alternative treatments. My weekends flying to clinics in Mexico and Germany, chasing miracles that science couldn't provide. My mother, meanwhile, had started attending a support group at the hospital. She tried to get me to come, but I refused. I didn't need to sit in a circle and share my feelings with strangers. I needed to fix this. One evening, exhausted from another fruitless consultation with a specialist in Houston, I returned to find my father's room full of people. My first thought was panic. Had something happened? But then I heard laughter. The visitors were from my mother's support group, and they'd brought homemade food, photographs, and stories. My father was sitting up in bed, more animated than I'd seen him in weeks. Listening to a man named Robert tell a story about his own battle with colon cancer 5 years earlier. "The doctors gave me 2 months," Robert was saying. "That was 5 years and 3 grandchildren ago. Not saying it was easy, not saying it wasn't hell, but here I am." After they left, my father turned to me. "You should go to the group, son. Your mother says it helps." "I don't need help," I said automatically. "No," he agreed quietly. "You need a miracle. But sometimes help is how miracles arrive." 3 months into treatment, the tumors had shrunk slightly, not enough to change the prognosis, but enough to give us foolish hope. My father was weak but stable. I'd moved back into my childhood home to help my mother with his care. The house felt smaller than I remembered, filled with photographs I'd never really looked at, my parents' wedding, My sister's high school graduation, family vacations to Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon. Evidence of a life lived fully, before everything fell apart. One night, unable to sleep, I found my mother in the kitchen. At 2 in the morning, baking bread. It was something she did when stressed, the kneading. She said, helped her think. I've been praying, she said without preamble. I know you think it's foolish. I don't think you're foolish, Mom. But you think prayer is. I didn't answer, which was answer enough. She shaped the dough with practiced hands, flour dusting her wedding ring. After Katie died, I stopped believing too. For years, I was so angry. But anger is exhausting, honey. Faith is different. It doesn't promise that bad things won't happen. It just promises you won't face them alone. I don't feel alone, I said. I have you and Dad. And when we're gone? The question hung between us like a blade. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the hospital cafeteria, trying to force down a sandwich, when my mother appeared in the doorway. Her face told me everything. The tumors had spread to his brain. Days, not weeks. Maybe hours. I don't remember the walk to his room. I don't remember the words the doctor said. I just remember my father, looking so small in the hospital bed. Reaching for my hand. I need you to do something for me, he whispered. Anything. I need you to forgive. Forgive who? Yourself. For not being able to fix this life. For taking Katie. God, if he exists. Me, for leaving. Dad. Promise me. I couldn't speak, could only nod. That night, I sat by his bedside while my mother dozed in the chair. The monitors beeped steadily, marking time we didn't have. Around midnight, his eyes opened, and he smiled at me. I'm not afraid, he said. How? The word came out broken. Because either there's nothing, in which case I won't know to be afraid. Or there's something, in which case. He squeezed my hand weakly. What an adventure. He died at dawn, as the first light crept through the windows. My mother and I were both holding his hands. The nurse who came to confirm what we already knew was gentle. Practiced in the choreography of death. Time of death 6:47 a.m. As if time still mattered. The funeral was small. My father had outlived most of his friends, and we'd kept his illness private. I gave a eulogy I don't remember writing, said words I don't remember choosing. Afterward, at the reception, Robert from the support group approached me. I know you don't know me well, he said, but I want you to know your father talked about you constantly. How proud he was. How much he loved you. I failed him, I heard myself say. I couldn't save him. No, Robert said firmly. You loved him. That's not failure. That's the only success that matters. That night, alone in my apartment for the first time in months, I found myself on my knees beside my bed. Not praying, exactly, just kneeling. It felt like the only position that matched how I felt inside, brought low, hollowed out. Desperate for something I couldn't name. If you're there, I whispered to the darkness, I don't understand you. I don't like you. But I'm running out of options here. My dad believed in something bigger than himself at the end. My mom still does. I need to know what they know. I need to not feel so alone. Nothing happened. No voice from heaven, no sudden peace. Just silence and my own ragged breathing. But I stayed on my knees until my legs went numb. And somehow, that felt like a beginning. 2 weeks after the funeral, I returned to the support group. Not for my mother, not even for my father's memory. But because I didn't know what else to do. The facilitator, a social worker named Maria, welcomed me without surprise. As if she'd been expecting me. The circle was smaller than I'd imagined, 6 people including myself. There was Robert, of course, and the elderly woman from the chapel, whose name I learned was Dorothy. A young mother named Ashley whose husband was fighting brain cancer. A teenager named Marcus who'd lost both parents to COVID. And an investment banker named James whose daughter had died of cystic fibrosis. We don't have answers here, Maria explained. We just have each other. For weeks, I just listened. Story after story of loss, of fear, of inexplicable survival and inexplicable death, but also stories of unexpected grace, strangers who became family, moments of joy in the midst of sorrow. Faith found in the ruins of certainty. Dorothy's grandson was in remission. She brought pictures, his bald head shining as he grinned at the camera. Every day is a gift, she said. And for the first time, the cliché didn't sound hollow. One evening, Marcus shared about a dream he'd had about his parents. They were in a garden, he said, and they looked young and happy. I don't know if it was real or just my brain trying to cope, he admitted. But it felt real. It felt like they were okay. What do you think happens when we die? Ashley asked the group. The question sparked a discussion that lasted 2 hours. Robert believed in heaven. Dorothy spoke of energy that never dies, just transforms. James, like me, admitted he didn't know but wanted to believe in something. Maria shared that in her culture, death was seen as a doorway, not a wall. I used to think faith was about knowing, I found myself saying. But maybe it's about being willing not to know and moving forward anyway. 6 months after my father's death, I was back at work. But nothing felt the same. The deals that had once consumed me seemed trivial. The metrics I'd used to measure success felt arbitrary. I was going through the motions, and everyone could tell. My business partner, Steve, finally confronted me. You need to take real time off. Figure out what you want. Because this half-present version of you isn't working for anyone. He was right. I took a sabbatical, the first real break in my adult life. I didn't know what to do with myself. For the first week, I just slept and watched old movies my father had loved. Then, restless, I started walking. San Francisco is a city of hills and hidden stairs, and I explored them all. Walking became meditation. Meditation became something almost like prayer. One afternoon, I found myself back at the hospital chapel. It had become a strange sanctuary for me. A place where I could sit with my questions without needing answers. Dorothy was there, as she often was. Even though her grandson had been discharged months ago. I come to say thank you, she explained. And to pray for others going through what we went through. Does it work? The praying? She considered this. I don't know if my prayers change God's mind. But I know they change mine. They make me more grateful. More compassionate, more aware of the suffering and beauty all around us. I started joining her. Not praying exactly, just sitting in intentional silence. Holding space for thoughts and feelings I'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Sometimes I talked to my father in my head. Sometimes I just breathed. One day, Dorothy didn't come. I learned later she'd had a stroke. I visited her in the same ICU where my father had been. Her family was there, the grandson. Healthy now, playing with a toy truck on the floor. Dorothy was conscious but couldn't speak. I sat with her the way she'd sat with me that first night. In silence that felt full rather than empty. Before I left, I did something that surprised me. I prayed. Out loud. Not eloquently, not even coherently, but honestly. I prayed for Dorothy, for her family. For all the families in all the hospitals facing impossible moments. I prayed for the doctors and nurses. I prayed for my mother, alone now in the house. She'd shared with my father for 43 years. I even prayed for myself, for clarity. For purpose, for the ability to transform my grief into something meaningful. Dorothy squeezed my hand. Later, her daughter told me. It was the first time she'd responded to anyone all day. The idea came to me during one of my walks. What if I used my resources, my money, my connections, my experience building organizations, to create something that actually mattered? Not another app or platform, but a foundation that provided support for families dealing with terminal illness. Not just financial support, but emotional, practical, and yes, spiritual support for those who wanted it. I started small, funding expansion of the hospital support group program. Then I partnered with local hospices to provide free counseling services. I hired Maria to run the programs, and she brought in chaplains, social workers, and therapists from every faith tradition and none. My mother became involved, teaching her bread baking as a form of therapy for grievers. Grief needs something to do with its hands, she said, and she was right. The program was so popular we had to move to a larger kitchen. At the 1-year anniversary of my father's death, we held our first fundraiser. I was terrified no one would come. But the ballroom was packed, former patients, families, healthcare workers. And to my surprise, many of my former business colleagues, who wrote checks that made my eyes water. Robert spoke about his journey. Ashley, whose husband had defied the odds and survived, shared their story. Marcus, now in college, talked about how the group had saved him from despair. And I, who had never been comfortable with public vulnerability, stood before 200 people and told them about my journey from certainty to mystery. From control to surrender, from isolation to community. I don't know if there's a God, I admitted. I don't know what happens when we die. But I know that we're not meant to face these questions alone. I know that there's grace in uncertainty and strength in vulnerability. My father's death broke something in me that needed to break. My illusion that I could control life. In that breaking, something else emerged. Call it faith, call it hope, call it human connection. Whatever it is, it's why we're all here tonight. The foundation grew beyond my wildest expectations. We opened centers in Oakland, San Jose, and Sacramento. We partnered with Stanford to research the intersection of spirituality and healing. We created an app, because I was still a tech guy at heart, that connected grieving people with support groups and resources nationwide. 3 years after my father's death, I met Sarah. She was a chaplain at one of our partner hospitals. Though she insisted she was more of a spiritual companion than a religious authority. She had a master's in divinity and a laugh that could fill a room. She was also a widow. Her husband had died of ALS 5 years earlier. Our first conversation lasted 6 hours. We talked about loss and faith. About the mystery of suffering, about the strange beauty that can emerge from pain. She told me about sitting with her husband, As his body failed, how he'd maintained his humor until the end. How his death had paradoxically strengthened her faith rather than destroying it. Faith isn't about getting the outcomes we want, she said. It's about finding meaning regardless of the outcome. We were married 2 years later in the hospital chapel, where I'd first learned to pray. Dorothy, recovered from her stroke though still fragile, was there. Robert officiated. He'd become an ordained minister in his retirement. My mother baked the wedding cake. Marcus, about to graduate from college, gave a reading. The ceremony was small, intimate, perfect. When asked about my vows, I said, "Sarah, you've taught me that love isn't the absence of loss, but the courage to love despite the certainty of loss. You've shown me that faith isn't about having answers, but about being present to the questions. I promise to walk with you through whatever comes, to sit with you in silence when words fail, and to celebrate with you every ordinary miracle we're given." It's been 7 years now, since that 3 a.m. phone call that changed everything. The foundation has helped thousands of families. I still don't know if there's a God in the traditional sense, but I've stopped needing to know. I've learned that faith, for me, isn't about belief in doctrine, but about practice, the practice of showing up, of being present, of holding space for mystery. I think about my father often. Sometimes I dream about him, and in those dreams, he's always healthy, always smiling. Are they just neurons firing, synapses trying to process loss? Or is there something more? I don't know, but I've learned to treasure the not knowing, to find peace in the questions themselves. Last month, I was visiting a patient in hospice, something I do regularly now. He was young, maybe 35, dying of lung cancer. Despite never smoking a day in his life, he was angry, raging against the unfairness of it all. I recognized myself in his fury. "How do you do it?" he asked me. "How do you work with dying people every day and not lose your mind?" "Because every dying person is also a living person," I said. "And as long as they're living, there's something sacred happening. Maybe it's just neurons and chemistry. Maybe it's something more. But either way, it's worthy of witness." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you believe in an afterlife?" "I believe in this life," I said. "I believe in the connections we make, the love we share, the ways we transform suffering into compassion. If there's something after, that's a bonus. But this, what we're doing right now, two strangers sharing the deepest questions humans can ask, this is already a kind of miracle." He smiled then, the first smile I'd seen from him. "My mom would like you. She keeps trying to get me to pray. Nothing wrong with prayer. Also nothing wrong with not praying. The important thing is not to close yourself off. Stay open to the possibility of grace, whatever form it takes." I left him with my card and an open invitation to our support groups. 2 weeks later, his mother called. He'd passed peacefully, she said. And in his final days, he'd found what she called a kind of acceptance. He'd even asked her to pray with him at the end. "He mentioned you," she said. Said you helped him understand that faith wasn't about having answers, but about being present to the mystery. After the call, I sat in my office and wept. Not from sadness, though there was sadness, but from a kind of gratitude I still struggle to articulate. Gratitude for the privilege of walking with people through their darkest moments. Gratitude for the Father whose death taught me how to live. Gratitude for the mystery that connects us all. Sarah and I have a daughter now. We named her Catherine, after my sister. She's 2 years old, all curls and curiosity. Sometimes I watch her explore the world with such wonder. And think about all the ways life will inevitably hurt her. The losses she'll face, the questions she'll wrestle with, the moments when everything she believes will be shaken. But I also think about the beauty she'll discover, the connections she'll make, the ways she'll learn to transform pain into purpose. I hope to teach her what my father's death taught me, that control is an illusion, but love is not. That certainty is overrated, but presence is everything. That we may not get the miracles we want. But if we stay open, we might discover the miracles we need. The support groups continue to meet every week. New faces appear as others graduate into whatever comes next. Recovery, acceptance, or death. Each story is unique, but the themes are universal. We all want to be seen. We all want to matter. We all want to believe that suffering has meaning, that love transcends loss. That something essential in us survives even death. Do I believe that now? On my best days, yes. On my worst days, I'm not sure. But even on the worst days, I show up. I sit with the dying and the grieving. I hold space for rage and despair and hope and grace. I practice resurrection in small ways. Through presence, through compassion, through the refusal to let death have the last word. Last week was the anniversary of my father's death. Sarah and I visited his grave. Catherine toddling between the headstones, picking dandelions. My mother was there, as she is every week, tending the flowers she's planted. At 81, she's frailer but still fierce. Still baking bread for the bereaved, still finding ways to transmute sorrow into service. We stood together in silence for a while. 3 generations linked by love and loss. Then Catherine, in her toddler wisdom, handed me a dandelion. For Grandpa, she said, though she'd never met him. I placed it on his headstone. And something in me broke open, not in pain but in recognition. This is what resurrection looks like. Not the dead rising, but the living carrying forward love. That evening, at the support group, a new member joined us. She was young, maybe 25, and had just lost her mother to breast cancer. She was angry at God, she said, angry at everyone who still had their mothers, angry at herself for not being able to save the person she loved most. I recognized that anger. It had been my constant companion for months after my father's death. But now, sitting in the circle, I felt only compassion. I shared my story, the whole messy journey from atheism to whatever I am now. Not quite a believer. Not quite a skeptic, but something in between, something more honest than either. Faith, I told her, isn't about having answers. It's about being willing to sit with questions. It's about showing up even when you don't know why. It's about discovering that broken hearts can still hold love. Maybe even hold more love because they've been broken open. She cried then, the kind of deep, body-shaking sobs that come when we finally let ourselves feel the full weight of loss. Dorothy, now 87 and one of our group elders, moved to sit beside her, offering tissues and presents. Robert shared about his own journey through anger to acceptance. Marcus, home from graduate school, talked about how the group had become his chosen family. This is church, I thought. Not the building, not the doctrine. But this, people showing up for each other in the midst of mystery. creating sacred space for all our questions and doubts and desperate hopes. The foundation is planning to expand nationally. We've received funding from tech billionaires who faced their own losses and recognized that no amount of money can purchase immortality. We're developing training programs for healthcare workers, creating resources for rural communities where support services are scarce, partnering with researchers to study the intersection of grief, growth, and resilience. But for all our expansion, the heart of what we do remains simple: we show up. We bear witness. We refuse to let anyone face the darkness alone. Sometimes people ask me if I ever went back to my old life, to the world of startups and stock options. The answer is yes and no. I still consult occasionally, still invest in companies I believe in. But my definition of success has fundamentally changed. It's no longer about accumulation but about connection. Not about control but about surrender. Not about avoiding death but about embracing life in all its fragility and beauty. My father would be proud, I think. Not of the foundation's success in conventional terms, but of the fact that his death gave birth to something life-giving. He was an engineer to the end, finding elegant solutions to complex problems. What could be more elegant than transforming grief into grace? I want to tell you something. Whoever you are, watching this video in your own moment of crisis or questioning, I want to tell you what I wish someone had told me 7 years ago. When my world fell apart. Your pain is real, and it deserves to be witnessed. Your questions are valid, even if, especially if, they have no answers. Your doubt doesn't make you weak, it makes you honest. And your capacity to love, even in the face of loss, is the closest thing to proof of the divine that I've found. You don't have to believe in God to experience grace. You don't have to have faith to practice faithfulness. You don't have to understand the mystery to be held by it. All you have to do is show up. As you are, with whatever fragments of hope you can muster. The rest, the healing, the meaning-making, the slow resurrection of joy, happens in its own time, in ways you can't predict or control. Trust the process, even when you can't trust anything else. Let yourself be broken open. Let yourself be surprised by kindness, your own and others. Let yourself discover that rock bottom can be solid ground on which to build something new. This isn't a story about finding faith in the conventional sense. I still don't know if there's a heaven or if consciousness survives death. Or if prayer is anything more than focused intention. But I've learned that living with these questions is its own form of faith. I've learned that mystery isn't the enemy of meaning but its source. My father died believing he was embarking on an adventure. Whether he was right or whether death is simply the end. His belief shaped how he lived his final days, with curiosity rather than fear, with gratitude rather than bitterness, with love rather than resignation. That's the kind of faith I'm interested in now, not faith as certainty, but faith as a way of being in the world, open to possibility even in the face of loss. The support group met again last night. We always end our meetings the same way, with what Maria calls a gratitude circle. Each person shares one thing they're grateful for, no matter how small. Sometimes it's big things: remission, reconciliation, a successful surgery. But often it's tiny things: a good cup of coffee, a text from a friend, a moment of laughter in the midst of tears. Last night, when it was my turn, I said I was grateful for questions. The new member, the young woman who'd lost her mother, looked puzzled. Questions? She asked. Questions mean we're still engaged, I explained. Still wrestling, still seeking, still alive to mystery. The opposite of faith isn't doubt, it's indifference. As long as we're asking questions, we're participating in something larger than ourselves. Dorothy added, and sometimes the questions are the answer. The searching is the finding. The journey is the destination. That sounds like something from a fortune cookie, Robert teased, and we all laughed. But there was truth in it. The journey from certainty through loss to a different kind of knowing. That journey is ongoing. There's no arrival, no moment when everything makes sense. There's just the walking, step by step, through darkness and light, alone and together. As the meeting ended and people began to leave, the young woman approached me. "Thank you," she said simply. "I still don't understand why this happened. I'm still angry. But I feel less alone." "That's enough for now," I told her. "That's more than enough." This morning, I woke early and drove to the beach. It's something I do sometimes when I need to think or not think, when I need to be reminded of my smallness in the best possible way. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The waves rolled in and out, eternal and indifferent, beautiful and terrifying. I thought about my father, about the adventure he believed he was beginning. I thought about my sister, forever 19 in my memory. I thought about Dorothy and Robert and all the people who've taught me that survival isn't just about not dying. It's about choosing how to live. A jogger passed by, nodded in greeting. A couple walked hand in hand, their dog chasing seagulls. A homeless man sat on a bench, feeding breadcrumbs to the birds. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, each carrying invisible griefs and private hopes. Each a walking miracle of consciousness in an unconscious universe. Or maybe not unconscious. Maybe aware in ways we can't fathom. Maybe every atom spins with purpose, every seemingly random event part of a pattern too large for us to perceive. Or maybe not. Maybe meaning is what we make, not what we find. I've stopped needing to know which is true. That's the gift my father's death gave me, the freedom from having to have answers. In their place, I have something better: wonder. Gratitude. The ability to say yes to life even knowing how it ends. The sun climbed higher, warming my face. Time to go home. Sarah would be awake now, Catherine probably demanding breakfast. Life, in all its mundane glory, was calling. I stood, brushed sand from my jeans, and headed back to my car. As I drove, I found myself humming, something I never used to do. It wasn't a hymn or anything religious. Just an old song my father used to whistle while he worked in his garage. I couldn't remember all the words, but I remembered the feeling it gave me as a child. Safe, loved, part of something larger than myself. That feeling is what I'd call faith now. Not belief in specific doctrines or outcomes, but trust in the underlying goodness of existence. Even when evidence suggests otherwise. Trust that love matters. Trust that showing up matters. Trust that we're all connected in ways we can barely imagine. And that death, whatever else it might be, cannot sever those connections. If you're watching this because you're facing loss, because someone you love is dying, or has died because you're struggling with questions about meaning and purpose, and what comes after, I want you to know you're not alone. Not in some abstract, spiritual sense, but literally. Right now, millions of people around the world are asking the same questions, feeling the same pain, searching for the same elusive peace. Find them. Find us. We're in hospitals and hospices, in church basements and community centers, in online forums and support groups. We're your neighbors, your coworkers. The stranger in the coffee shop who looks like they're carrying something heavy. We're everywhere, hidden in plain sight. A secret society of the broken-hearted and hope-haunted. Don't wait until you have faith to seek community. Don't wait until you're healed to help others heal. Don't wait until you understand to start practicing presence. The waiting is the thing that keeps us stuck. The showing up is what sets us free. My father died 7 years ago. In that time, I've lost others. Dorothy passed last spring. Peacefully, surrounded by family and friends from the group. Robert is fighting cancer again, this time with less optimism but no less grace. My mother is growing frail, preparing for her own adventure, as she calls it. And someday, probably sooner than I'd like, it will be my turn. The thought doesn't terrify me the way it once did. Not because I'm confident about what comes next, but because I've learned that how we die is inseparable from how we live. If we practice presence now, we'll be present then. If we practice love now, we'll die loving. If we practice surrender now, we'll know how to let go when the time comes. The foundation continues to grow. Sarah and I are working on a book together, weaving our stories of loss and discovery. Catherine is starting preschool next month, beginning her own journey of questions and wonder. Life, in all its complexity and contradiction, continues. But I want to end not with grand pronouncements but with something simple. Something my father taught me without words in his final days. Every moment is both ordinary and sacred. Every breath is both biological function and minor miracle. Every goodbye contains within it the seed of every hello we've ever shared. This is what I know, 7 years into my journey from certainty to mystery. We are more resilient than we believe. We are more connected than we appear. We are held by something, call it God. Call it love, call it the quantum entanglement of all beings, that is larger than our understanding. But not larger than our experience. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe anything. But I invite you to experiment with showing up. To practice presence even when you'd rather run. To say yes to the support that's offered. Even when you think you should be strong enough to handle everything alone. And if you're someone who has already walked through the valley of the shadow, who has faced the ultimate questions and survived, I invite you to become a guide for others. Not because you have answers, but because you know how to sit with questions. Not because you're healed, but because you know that healing isn't a destination, but a journey we take together. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for carrying your own story with such courage, even when you don't feel courageous. Thank you for being part of this beautiful, terrible, mysterious human experience. May you find peace in the questions. May you find strength in vulnerability. May you find faith, whatever that means for you, not as escape from reality, but as the courage to face reality with an open heart. And may you know, in your bones if not in your beliefs, that you are not alone. You have never been alone. You will never be alone. Even in the darkness, especially in the darkness. You are held, you are seen, you are loved. That's all any of us can offer each other, presence in the darkness. Witness to the questions, love that transcends understanding. It's not everything, but it's enough. More than enough. It's the ground of all miracles. The source of all healing, the answer that makes peace with having no answers. This is my story. This is our story. This is the human story, told again and again in countless variations, each unique, all the same. We love, we lose, we grieve, we grow. And somehow, in the midst of it all, we find reasons to keep going, to keep hoping, to keep showing up for each other. That, to me, is the real miracle. Not that suffering ends, but that we find meaning in it. Not that death is defeated, but that love persists. Not that we get the answers we want, but that we become the answer for each other. Go in peace. Go in questions. Go in the knowledge that whatever you're facing, others have faced it before and others will face it again. And in that facing, we are bound together across time and space. In the most profound communion available to human beings, the communion of shared mortality and transcendent love. The circle continues. The story continues. Life, in all its fragile, tenacious beauty, continues. And so do we.